But the biggest loss of capital here will be the human capital of young men who are sitting and staring at their phone and watching the price of Bitcoin or the price of AMC. And ask yourself, would you be better off taking that 1, 2, or 3 hours a day and working out, trying to form relationships with mentors, with romantic relationships, with people at work, getting great at something so you can be the person on the other side of the trade? The greatest loss in capital here is from young men who are more prone to gambling addiction, who don't understand the markets. I think we are setting ourselves up similar to how there's a ton of young women out there who became very depressed by sitting in their rooms looking at Instagram. Self-cutting and self-harm skyrocket. I think you are going to see an explosion in young male depression, and I think a lot of it is going to be reverse engineered to apps that convince you you're part of a movement or physically addict you to your phone. Ask yourself, would your time staring at Robinhood be better spent somewhere else? That is the real capital destruction that is taking place here.
Hey there, freaks. It's your host, Matt Odell. That was our good friend, Professor Scott Galloway, on MSNBC this week, clearly showing the world that he is short Bitcoin and has yet to cover those calls. I am joined here by my good friends from Australia, Tan and Wizard of Oz, and all the freaks who are also joining us live. What's up, boys?
G'day, Matt. G'day, Wiz.
Hey, Matt.
G'day, everyone.
Hey, k3tan.
So, you know, I am a very enthusiastic host, but I am a new host. This is Citadel Dispatch number 7. This is our 7th Citadel Dispatch, that's pretty amazing to me that we're almost at 2 months here. So that's super exciting. This is a show that started in 2020. Do not forget it. So we've been here for over a year now. And today we will be talking about very important topics. I feel like every dispatch we kind of talk about the same things from different angles, but it's more important than ever now. And this is kind of what we've dedicated our lives to. So why the fuck not? The primary thing that we're going to start off with is this whole concept of open source versus closed source software. And I think the crux of this issue is one of these things that we've seen this week, these last 2 weeks, has been really enlightening to people and have woken them up to some of the issues with our current system. And I think a lot of it comes down to these closed systems versus these open systems. So I mean, let's start there. k3tan, like, what are your thoughts on why is open source so important to us?
Yeah, so I think open source represents for us, particularly as Bitcoiners, as something that we can look to inspect. And we come in a very, it's kind of like we're very paranoid. We're skeptical. I wouldn't call it paranoid. I'd call it skepticism. We question things. And so to be able to get a satisfactory answer, we need open source software that is code that is available for everyone to look at and inspect. And the guys who have the ability to look at that code, they are able to then, develop on it, as well as bring those security benefits. Because something like Bitcoin, for instance, I want to know that my money will not just disappear tomorrow. And so that is why open source is such an important thing. One of the other great things about open source, and this is what I've found, is that you can ask open source developers for features that you want, and you can request them, and the chances are of them actually getting back to you and giving you a response is far greater than if you were to call up, I don't know, Bank of America and get your your app changed in a certain way that you feel is, just say you want a dark mode, for instance. I think every wallet here and everything, like anything that you kind of want to request, a developer will look at it and go, you know what, I think that's a good feature. Let's push it through. And it just makes a far, far better system. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it makes a better system than what we currently have. So those are my opening thoughts on open source.
Yeah, I'll add to that, k3tan. So just for a bit of background, so my background's actually as a software dev, and I've spent 35 years working in closed source. So I've worked for banks, insurance companies, government agencies, not the three-letter ones. And so I have a pretty good idea about how that process works and the strengths of that, and the weaknesses. So very much a significant part of my life spent working in a closed source environment. And I guess probably prior to Bitcoin, I'd not really understood the value of open source. And having been in Bitcoin for 3 or 4 years now, I'm very much an open source advocate. To compare some of the closed source approaches to open source, from a closed source perspective, it's generally you're looking at a very hierarchical chain of command. So it's a top-down. You're working for an organization. They have a mission. There's usually someone who's driving the vision or the outcome. That's usually a committee, and so it's a set of legislation that's passed by the geniuses in Parliament, and then it's policy and legislation, and then that gets implemented into business rules, and then you build the code that builds those systems to enact all that stuff. So those things are often done under tight time pressures, despite appearances from the outside. They're inordinately complicated systems. I've worked on some very, very large complicated systems, 10 million lines of code or more, that are 30, 40, some getting up to 50 years old. So there is an incredible amount of, I guess, a lot of people would refer to it as legacy debt, but it's also embedded IP or embedded knowledge of the organization. Now you compare that to open source, it's kind of the absolute opposite. So you've got the hive mind that look building source and building solutions. So you don't have one person's vision, or you don't have a mandate for things like legislation or compliance in the case of, say, banking and insurance. You've got a group of people who are trying to achieve an outcome with lots of different ideas about how to do that. And open source is very much a meritocracy. So it's, to reiterate k3tan's point, you get all of that scrutiny, and that scrutiny comes back to security. So Bitcoin Core is probably one of the most heavily scrutinized code bases in the world, and it will continue to be so. And the higher the number goes up, the more scrutiny there will be, and the more caution there will be about changing it. But on top of that security perspective, there's also that openness, which gives confidence about what the software does, how it's being used, what it could be used for. And that's where closed source systems just are never going to engender that type of trust. I think k3tan and I saw that here in Australia last year. The government, Department of Home Affairs, developed what was it, k3tan, a COVID tracing app that you could put on your phone. And there were a lot of people, including myself, who asked for the department to open source that, and that would have given a lot more confidence about how the data was being secured, what data was being collected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And whilst they did actually bow to opening the client component, they did not open source the back end. The risk lies. So that's I guess, my perspective and a little bit of background to flesh that out.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you guys. You're both you guys for joining me. On Dispatch, I do like to, as the freaks may have noticed, I do like to tap guests that maybe have not been on many appearances before, public appearances. I think, Wiz, this is your first podcast. So I'm pretty excited to be the first, to pop your cherry, so to speak. I know k3tan is
Be gentle
on.
with me, big boy.
I also, even though I might have more experience with this, I do not have much experience being the host. So I do, especially, I get a little bit excited in the beginning. I don't like to have all the filler in the beginning with the shows I listen to. I'm a big consumer of podcasts myself. So I kind of jump the gun a lot, and I'm not really that good at sometimes I talk too much, and sometimes I just try and treat the mic as a hot potato and just get it off. So I appreciate all the freaks sitting here with us and learning as we go. That's the fun part. So one of the reasons I bring this up is because one of the freaks asked in the comments, yes, on Dispatch every week, we have the price ticker up. The top price is the Evil Empire. It's the Coinbase price. It's the Compliance Pro price. The bottom is BISC. It's the no KYC street price. It's the real price. And I expect the freaks to pump the bottom price. As for open source, so we're available. The Citadel Dispatch goes out on Twitch. It goes out on Twitter through Periscope, and it goes out through YouTube. If you're a freak that's come back in the past and you watch it live, you'll see that I end it with a music video. YouTube does cut that at the end, and I do spend a lot of time trying to pick out which song I'm going to put on there. So fuck you, YouTube. But I am kind of just ripping a music video without the license. So open source, yeah. So anyway, we got Wiz back. He just came back. Welcome back, Wiz. You didn't miss much. I've just been talking too much. And let's fucking go. I wanted to jump into real quick. So the reason that I bring up open source is I feel like we've had this whole craziness that has happened with the stock market, and it's kind of opened people's eyes, right? We have this memification of the world, and some people think that memes you can meme something into reality. That's not the case. What the reality is memes are a great way of showing reality, and depicting reality in a simple viral way. And we saw memes just grow in almost like an exponential virulent way this year and last year. And the culmination feels like this, this is the latest chapter with this stock market stuff. So we had Scott Galloway in the beginning of this episode talking, and he was talking shit about Bitcoiners. He kind of just like lumped us in, I guess, with the day traders who are trying to pump the price of AMC and these other stocks. And I think what it highlights is that so much of our lives are these black boxes, right? And this idea with open software and open networks and open money is that everyone can see what's going on. So it doesn't mean that you won't have shenanigans, but at least we know, we know what those shenanigans, we can see where the source of the issue was, maybe after the fact, if there was a bug after the fact. It's not like there aren't any bugs in open source code. It's not like someone can't put something in there malicious, but maybe someone can find it, and afterwards we could actually diagnose it, right? So with that said, I think an easy way for people to understand where we're coming from here is with the encrypted chat apps. So when we're trying to send a message to someone and we're trying to send a message to someone privately, there's a bunch of different ways you can try and do that, but most of those ways require trust. The only way you can actually prove and verify that something is actually end-to-end encrypted is if they open up the client. This is what Wiz said earlier about, I think you were talking about COVID, the COVID tracking. And if you open up the client, then we're able to verify and prove that there's no malicious things that are going on. Now, what Wiz said was we needed the server client was not open source, and that is okay sometimes. If the configuration is set up in a way that's end-to-end encrypted, and the client encrypts everything locally before it gets sent to the server, then we can verify that it's encrypted, and we can verify that the server can't even if the server was malicious, wouldn't be able to compromise the message. But for other things, we need to self-host on the server side as well. And this is where k3tan really shines, because he's been trying to dog food self-hosting his life. And he has this guide for it at k3tan.com/self-hosting. So I think I really want to dive into this guide head first. k3tan, where do you think we should start here?
So I think we should start as to what are the benefits and what are the, I guess, the disadvantages to self-hosting. You kind of want to make an assessment of whether or not this is actually something you want to do. So how about we start there? Now, obviously, when it comes to self-hosting, you are doing it yourself. There's no real, there's no hand holding in terms of there's no tech support for you. There's forums who will help you, gladly help you. In fact, there's an entire Reddit for self-hosted. So if you look at our self-hosted, these guys are basically a community of guys who are self-hosting their own stuff. Now you can learn from them, but in terms of if things go down, for example, your internet service provider has shut you off, or alternatively is just gone down, which in Australia happens quite often, unfortunately. Then your website's not available anymore, and the things that you are hosting are not available. The other thing that you're beholden to is also your electricity provider. And that is something that some people just don't think about as well. So if in a blackout, you obviously don't have access to your digital services anymore. So those are some of the, I guess, the negative parts of self-hosting. But the positives are great as well. You get control over your own data. You aren't subject to being cancelled as easily. You aren't, you aren't being data mined to some extent, and the things that you are being data mined for could, are things that you probably want public anyway. So it really depends on what the service that you are doing, or the service that you are self-hosting, and what it intends to, what you intend to do with that particular software. So that is where, I guess, the benefits are to self-hosting, and also the disadvantages as well.
Okay, so I mean, there's to break it down, right? There's two main advantages, right? We have, to people in the comments, this is a different Wiz. This is Wizard of Oz. He's from Australia. We got both our guests today are from Australia, so they're actually joining us in the morning. It's early morning their time, so I appreciate that. And then we have the other Wiz, which is the Wiz of Japan. But yeah, so with self-hosting, we have two main benefits, right? You have privacy and sovereignty. Privacy is probably a little bit shakier. Maybe there's certain situations, there's nuance there, like our favorite word, there's nuance there where you could actually maybe have worse privacy if you fuck up self-hosting. But I think sovereignty is night and day. No matter what, you're better off self-hosted, right? Would you agree with that breakdown?
Yeah, I'd agree with that one as well. Yeah, well articulated there, Matt. Particularly with the privacy, if someone was to somehow get into your network remotely, then you have zero privacy, and so that that could present a major problem. But for self-hosted, in terms of sovereignty, it is night and day. You cannot be cancelled. You're not at the whims of somebody else, and I think that that's a great thing.
Wizard of Oz, you with us?
I am indeed, Matt.
Good to have you with us. So k3tan's just explaining to us the we're going over the basic benefits and negatives of self-hosting, and then the key here. So we have the privacy and we have the sovereignty side. Let's start with the sovereignty side. I think that's the easier side. So I think in terms of privacy, I want all the freaks to realize, no matter what, you know, when it comes to privacy, you have to be extra cautious all the time, and you just have to always be like crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And that goes for this conversation as well. There's no privacy silver bullet here. But on the sovereignty side, there's some really interesting elements. And before we get into that, thank you, freaks, for pumping the price on BISC. We're getting going. This is exactly how I like to spend my Bitcoin Tuesdays. So on the sovereignty side, I mean, the key thing, right, is we saw the president of the United States while he was sitting in office. We saw him get kicked off of Twitter, right, and just completely removed from Twitter. And I heard there was like some people, like some like talking heads that like ignore most of it, but there's some talking heads that are like saying like, oh, he's been surprisingly quiet during the whole transition. It's like, yeah, you like removed his main loudspeaker and like kicked him off the platform. k3tan is using, alongside all of us, I actually announced this show on Mastodon as well as Twitter, is using a self-hosted alternative to Twitter called Mastodon. Actually, you don't have to use it in a self-hosted way. You can use someone else's instance or server, or you can host it yourself. But k3tan is hosting it himself. So k3tan is interacting with this global network of individuals on this distributed Twitter clone, and it's being hosted on a Raspberry Pi in his fucking closet, right, k3tan?
Yeah. So yeah, what I am hosting is it's actually on my desktop PC, and it is in a virtual machine, and basically it's an alternative to Mastodon, and it is called Pleroma. It's a lighter version of Mastodon, and basically this allows you to communicate and have your own social media profile without the need of a centralized server having all of your data and all of your information. So I think that is something that is of benefit in the event that you have or you hold views that you may think will get cancelled. Then, you know, this is a fantastic option where you self-host your own social media, and we're able to do that now with this thing called the Fediverse. And basically, there are other instances out there that you can subscribe to, which I guess it makes it more decentralized. So what that means is you can sign up to one of the more popular ones that are in the Bitcoin space is bitcoinhackers.org. That is run by a person by the name of, NVK. He has ownership of that entire instance. You are subject to his moderations in that instance. So if he doesn't like something, he has the ability to censor that. Now, if you don't like what he is doing, you are welcome to go to another instance that treats you better. Kind of like if you go to a country and you don't like that particular country and the way that, you know, the taxes are too high, or you don't like this particular way, well, then you move to another jurisdiction. It is the same or similar approach, whereby you go to another instance where you think you are treated better, and there is no, or you don't, you prescribe to their ideals and their beliefs, and you go through with them. And you know what? If you don't like any other instance on the planet, the last thing that you can do is say, you know what? Screw you all. I'm hosting myself, and I am going to give my views out there using my own server. And anyone who wants to follow me and connect with me can do so. And so I think from a social media perspective, this is great for not being, or well, it makes it difficult to cancel you and your audience and cut you off from your audience. So that is something that is a far better outcome than the current social media platforms that we see today. And so that is why I'm a big proponent of it. And I really like it. It is as Matt said, a Twitter clone, and it is. I really enjoy it. I think you're able to curate the discussion based on what you want to see, rather than what someone else wants you to see, and that is powerful in itself. And so that's why I like
own the data, right? I think a key aspect is like you own the data. Like on Bitcoin Hackers, for instance, I'm on Rodolfo's NVK's instance. He can just nuke my account, right? And I just like lose everything. The cool thing about Mastodon is you can gracefully move over, which Twitter doesn't have that, right? Like you can't move your social graph over to a different server, but you can on Mastodon, but not if the host actually just nukes your account and doesn't give you time to move.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And
so
yeah, go on.
You're up to the discretion. Like they basically own you and your digital profile. But if you don't like that, then you can leave.
Right. There's competition. There's like a free market competition, and you could run your own instance. And I guess if we both ran our own instance, then pretty much no one could really censor us unless they were going hardcore, like really just trying to fuck hard with the internet, like a very sophisticated actor. But there's also instances where cross instances are censoring each other, right? We saw with Gab moved on to Mastodon and then basically, I guess, like detached itself from the rest of the Fediverse, right?
Yeah, so Gabs, they're sitting out in their own, which is fine. But like the fact that they can do that, they're not actually being censored. So they run their own servers, they run their own infrastructure, and they are creating a Gab little community there. And if you want to see that content, then you have to sign up for within there. But that's the kind of the trade-offs. There's nuances everywhere, as Matt would love to explain.
Nuance. Don't own that domain. Nuance.com. That might be one that Michael Saylor owns.
Possibly.
So I still can't believe.
Jump in here,
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of themes here. The general theme with self-hosting giving rise to improved sovereignty. It's a little bit like, say, weightlifting, in the sense that not be particularly strong or particularly fit, but you'd like to be. And so you go to the gym and you perhaps get some training, or you train out with a buddy, and you slowly build your technique, and you start to do compound lifts, and all of a sudden you can start to do things that you couldn't do before. You actually don't need to ask anyone to pick up the bag of pool salt or to carry a bag of concrete, because you're strong enough to do it yourself. And in the digital world, the issue about self-hosting is it's about making yourself more self-sovereign. So you can choose to do these things or not. Now, I think for me, one of the big things that Bitcoin's really made me think about is trade-offs and incentives. So the trade-off you're making when, to use k3tan's example, you can join NVK's Bitcoin Hackers, and if you get cancelled from there, you can go somewhere else, and in the end, you can run your own if you choose. The trade-off you're making there generally is the size of the community you're interacting with, and certainly there's no question that the size of the Mastodon community at the moment is considerably smaller than Twitter. So this, on the one side, like Bitcoin Hackers, for example, you've got quite a tight community there. We're not there to talk about market to Bitcoin. And that's great for sharpening skill and clarifying your ideas and asking and things that are happening in the wider world from a Bitcoin perspective. Twitter, on the other hand, has that broader network effect with people who are in Twitter for a whole range of other ideas and interests, and maybe stumble across some thread that refers to Bitcoin that makes them curious. And I guess that's one of the reasons I've remained on Twitter, where a lot of Bitcoiners have left Twitter recently, really to try and amplify quality signal, like from k3tan and yourself, Matt, for people who are reaching out and trying to understand and searching around for information about. Big fan of self-hosting. Run my own node and starting to run other things as well. And very grateful for both of you and k3tan for your guides. And a lot of work to do. I always feel like I'm playing catch up in Bitcoin.
Look, I think you make some great points there in terms of the differences between Twitter. Like, you're 100% right. If you want to control your own discussion and have a really detailed, in-depth discussion, then I think Mastodon is a great place to have that. But if you want to dunk on shitcoins and if you want to sort of build a bigger audience base, then I think Twitter is still the place to do that. However, over time, maybe that might shift because people, you're still being sort of, I guess, looked at from the Twitter angle. And so, your profile can be cancelled. But at the same time, Twitter has that, like, there is no doubt that there is a huge network effect with Twitter. It is fantastic for tapping into new segments, new markets, and you have the ability to, dunk on people that you otherwise wouldn't have the ability to do if you were to curate your own discussion of the people that you like. So it really depends on what you want here. But I personally, I really, really like the Mastodon side of things and what the Fediverse is doing. And I like the discussion that's happening there. So I tend to go there, but then I'm always, doing I'm doing both at the same time. And
it's like in-group versus out-group. That's why I'm like tweeting like Zero Hedge right now.
That's right.
Right, it's just like all caps lock to the out group. You need to know for the out group, and then I do like, does anyone have any nuanced opinions about why Tor is down in Mastodon?
Yep.
I mean, I think it goes back to a discussion that we have in Bitcoin a lot of times, where if you choose a centralized path, you're going to have cheaper transactions, and you're going to have more. Everything will be faster and cheaper. So it stands to reason that in an environment where we actually have real competition and we don't have overbearing government regulation, a centralized option will give you more reach at a better cost. But what happens is, the reality is we don't live in that situation. And we can't assume that we'll continue to live in that situation. And so we have to basically spend some of that efficiency, spend some of that reach for censorship resistance and self-reliance and self-sovereignty. And that's kind of, where this whole, self-hosting concept comes from, backing up your stuff, encrypting your stuff, verifying everything yourself. Don't trust, verify. Yeah. So, I mean, so we have Mastodon, right? So we talked about Mastodon, and you said, Pleroma, right? That's Pleroma, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And Pleroma is what you use to host your Mastodon instance and your relay as well.
So Pleroma is not a Mastodon instance. It's a competitor to Mastodon. So it's like just another implementation of Mastodon. Think of it like, Bitcoin Core versus, say, for example, I don't know, Bitcoin BTCD.
But it all interacts in the same Fediverse.
That is correct. So it's yes, that's right. So you've got a Fediverse, and then you've got different instances of pieces of software. So, for example, in the Fediverse, you can even do YouTube stuff, but they just call it PeerTube. And so you can then follow with your, your social media instance, a particular channel on a PeerTube network. You can also, I think they've got another one for Instagram, or the Instagram clone as well. It's called Pixel something. I don't really use it.
That's a perfect example, right, of like what we were talking about, right? Like if you were trying to host on PeerTube, I mean, you're going to melt your internet connection, right?
That is correct, yes. And that's why I probably haven't gone down the path of hosting my own videos. Like I have a YouTube channel, and I would like to self-host it. It's just that my internet connection probably won't allow me to do that for the viewership that I get. So that's kind of the I guess the difference between a decentralized approach and a centralized approach.
That's what I think people don't realize, right? Is like so like we have the privilege of saying that, you know, we can use Twitter for certain things and use Mastodon for other things. I think the reason we haven't seen censorship resistant tools, open source tools, just tools that empower individuals used in mass yet is because you need to have a reason. You know, you need to get burnt. You need to have a motivation to go out and deal with the trade-offs that are present with it. You know, Donald Trump and a bunch of American conservatives all of a sudden had that happen to them, right? They saw it happen, and what did they do? They tried to flock to centralized alternatives first, right? They tried to flock to Parler, and Parler got deplatformed, and then they learned that just because it's a different platform, if it all runs on AWS, it all runs on Amazon servers, it doesn't matter. With money, with Bitcoin, we have to be forward thinking because there's billions of dollars on the line. And we can't learn after AWS deplatforms Bitcoin. So that's why we have, as Bitcoiners, we have all these, on the outside, it seems like crazy discussions on theoreticals, right? But for everyone else that's not dealing with a global distributed 24/7 financial network, I think they can deal with, I'll host my shit on YouTube, and if YouTube bans me, then I'll figure out a competitor. And if I host it on Vimeo and then AWS takes Vimeo down, then maybe I'll start trying to figure out PeerTube or BitTorrent or something like that. And then on top of that, we saw the same thing happen again, but this time with stocks, right? And people seeing that they were gambling in this casino that's controlled by centralized actors, and they don't play by fair rules. So it's funny because you have like the Mark Cubans of the world are coming out and saying like, oh, DeFi is the answer here. DeFi is not the answer. The answer is to having a good money that goes up in value, so you don't have to gamble in a casino to begin with, gamble in a centralized casino to begin with.
Matt, I just love that. Like just the explanations there were fantastic. Go on, Wiz.
That point about unfair rules, I don't know about if it's unfair rules or if it's just that the incentives are not perhaps as well understood as they should be. And I think Wall Street Bets got a salutary lesson on that. And it goes for all of the big which are incentivized to build the network effects, make them as big as possible, as quickly as possible, because that's how they monetize. If you are not paying for it, you are the product. That's it. Guess what? You got free trade. You signed up for free trading on Robinhood. How did you think it was going to work? They front run your trades, they sell your data, and they counter trade. It's not a big fucking surprise. If you thought, gee, how does the business model work? Because that would be my question first. If it's free, how am I getting fucked over here? How are they going to do it? How are they going to make money? Because if I'm going to use a product or a service, I want the provider of the product or service to remain in business if it's a good service, because I want to continue to use it. Therefore, I want to understand how they're making money. So in Robinhood's case, you don't have to think too hard before you're going, so if they're not charging me trading fees and it costs them money to trade, and they have to pay all the clearinghouse fees, they've got to bankroll the trades, etc., etc., etc. That money's coming from somewhere, and the volumes they're talking about, remember, because they're trying to build that network effect, those are serious amounts of money. So the fact that Robinhood was counter trading, front running, and selling the data was much like the deplatforming of significant US political figures, a bit of a rude surprise to them. But I guess from exactly what we're talking about here is it's a trade-off. You've got to understand what the incentives of those people are, and their incentives are to make more money and to grow their network. And if they see things that impede that, they will kick you.
Yeah, I mean,
When those things happen, they are calls on why self-hosting is so important.
it's I mean, maybe it's part of the Bitcoin addiction. But I
Yeah.
know you guys are also guilty of it, and I'm sure all the freaks, or a lot of the freaks, are guilty of it as well. Pretty much just everything that happens in my day-to-day life, I bring back to Bitcoin lessons, or Bitcoin metaphors, or shitcoin metaphors, and shitcoin lessons. And this whole Robinhood business model thing goes right back down to the transaction fees. When people talk about transaction fees and Bitcoin and shitcoins and stuff, like, there's no such thing as anything in life being free, including a transaction. And you have to figure out where that cost is. That cost is hidden in all different places in our day-to-day lives. And it's paid by all different people it's hidden from view most of the time. And you see that with the shitcoin networks. With Bitcoin, it's right in your face. You send a transaction, how much data? It's going to be at a market rate, and you're going to pay for that data. So it seems more expensive on the surface, but it's really because there's a transparent negotiation going on there. As for fair rules, I probably misspoke a little bit there. I think the key isn't necessarily the rules, especially in a censorship-resistant system. The key is who can change the rules and how easy those rules can change. And that's what people don't realize about Bitcoin. The value doesn't come from any specific rule, like the 21 million cap. The value comes from it being so hard to fucking change. And Bitcoin shares this with other self-hosted options. The difference with Bitcoin is that there's also this like macro game theory that's happening that keeps people in consensus with each other, because there's a financial incentive to stay in consensus, right? But no one in the higher ups of Pleroma, like one of the Pleroma management teams, can push a change on k3tan's instance without k3tan running that change. He has to go out and run that change.
Good luck.
And that's a massive change in power, right? That gives us a huge, massive check on any kind of centralized power.
Yeah. And so you get, a nice, freedom. You get this sovereignty. You get, you practically achieve these, buzzwords that we keep, harping on about. It is the practical solutions to these problems that have been, well, now, if you look at it just in the past couple of years, have just been absolutely devastating for people. And there is something that we can actually do about it now. Whereas historically, people have just been moaning about it. People have just been going, whatever. But now we actually have built something that we can do something different for a different outcome. And I think that is it's a game changer. It makes me incredibly bullish on Bitcoin and on what the ability of the individual to do. So I've just blown away by the amount of knowledge that I have sort of just found randomly on the internet, on Reddit and those sorts of things, and then just put that practically into my own home, and being able to be a node on the internet and being able to disclose a part of myself and share with the world what I want through my own website, hosted literally with the data that's in my hard drive right now. I think that is an incredible thing. But that is how the internet first started. We're just going full circle. We are going full circle. So we just, to say that, you should put your social media profile on with another server that you don't know, that you don't trust, with all this information, i.e. Facebook, that is absolutely, that was, in the, I suppose, the 90s, people were thinking, who the hell is using their real name on the internet? And then Facebook comes out and everyone's using their real name. And now it's this huge data mining that's happening. And so we've come back now to go, all right, well, we don't want that. That's been a pretty big mistake. So now let's go back to self-hosting. It's just gone one massive circle in the span of 20 years, I'd say.
It's because we could get away with centralization. Centralization was like the easy scaling, right? It gave us like these easy benefits, that the trade-off was censorship resistance, and it didn't really bite us in the ass until recently. We haven't and I think we needed, like, the internet needed to get so mature to a point to where it's just like the cancel culture turned on it, right? I don't even know. It's just like it kind of came. It feels like it's just gaining steam now, and it's worse than it has been in the past. But maybe that's just my own, my own bias. But anyway, I want to jump right back into actionable shit, because that's my favorite part about this show. What else are we running on this home server?
All right, so we've also got a Nextcloud. Now, one of the actually, let's start with my router. I think that is the backbone to basically my private world and my public world. And so the router that I'm using is pfSense, and that is hosted. Basically, you need a computer to run this on, and it just needs two network ports. One where the internet goes in, and the other one is where your network comes out of. So that is essentially and all your devices are stored within in your LAN, so to speak. So you've got a WAN port and a LAN port. Everything else can come out of there. Now, essentially, what you're able to do with a pfSense router is you can have your entire network VPN'd using just the one connection. So every single one of your devices, as soon as they enter, they will be protected by a commercial VPN. I know that, Matt, you like to shill Mulvad. There's some other ones out there. There's Proton VPN and iVPN. Those are probably the best. But Mulvad, yes, okay, I would have to agree with you. I think Mulvad has the best checkout as well, in terms of not having to use an email address. You don't have to. Yeah, it's fantastic. It is absolutely incredible. And I also heard on the grapevine that they are looking to implement natively accepting Lightning payments. So keep an eye out for that. I suppose that's on their pipeline, I believe. So that'll be cool. And so the other thing that you can also do is run ad blockers throughout your entire network. Now, what that means is you get this huge list of all this malicious or dodgy trackers, and you can ban them as soon as it hits your network. So you don't have to see random garbage on the internet. Now, the other thing that you can do with a pfSense router is run your own OpenVPN server. And what that allows you to do is access your network from anywhere on the planet in a secure way, without opening up ports and those sorts of things, and making it a little bit more accessible for others. A VPN server is what you want to run, and that way it just sort of makes it as though that your mobile phone or your laptop, even though you're in the middle of nowhere, as long as you've got internet connection, no matter where you are in the world, you are able to call back to your home, and it will act as though it is just another device on your home network. So you can now access whatever services that you have hosted at home. And of course, you can also do hosting your own external websites using your pfSense router, and that is using what's known as a reverse proxy. And basically what a reverse proxy does is it once some piece of traffic asks for a domain, it will say, all right, well, this is the IP address that I'm asking for, and this is the computer that I need to go and access to. So that is basically like a message to say, all right, well, can you go and fetch that data from this particular computer, say, for example, a Raspberry Pi, if that's where you're hosting it, and it will go out and fetch that and relay it back out to the network, and back out to the person who's requesting that information or that website. And so those are the types of things. There's plenty more to do with pfSense, But I think having a good router that enables you to do this is something that's worthwhile investing in and having a look in. There are other ways that you can do this. You don't have to have a full-blown desktop PC that I have. You can do this on the cheaper. You can get the official one from Netgate. They also have this little box that you can use as a router as well. So it just really depends on what you want to do there. So that is it's pfSense router. That's the one.
So I think Wiz made a very important point here, and this is a point that I try and make when we talk about Bitcoin topics and Bitcoin privacy, and Bitcoin in general and everything, is don't get overwhelmed. Like it's easy to get overwhelmed when k3tan starts dropping knowledge on you, but one step at a time, little improvements. You don't have to be like a boy wizard and make it all happen. So Wiz, I know you've been messing around with some of the items in this guide. And I'm curious on like your takeaways, from like a more normie level. Like how are you finding it? What are you finding with these trade-offs here and getting along?
Yeah, look, I think that's the key point that once I understood, I was a lot more comfortable, and that is that a lot of these things, including understanding Bitcoin, it's a bit of a journey. And I'm a practical sort of person, so I like to do actionable things, and sometimes that leads to me getting myself into hot water. But for me, I learn by doing. So the stuff, the light bulb moment was really on understanding security and privacy were two sides of the same coin, and that in a natively digital world, you can't have security without privacy. And conversely, neither can you have privacy. So that really made me sit up and pay attention, but also just to not get overwhelmed by, oh my God, I'm not at a Jedi level. Okay, but what can I do now? Okay, I can run a VPN for me. All right, so spend a bit of time looking for a good VPN provider, have a little poke around, ask people at Bitcoin meetups what they're using, why they chose that one, and then use that. Okay, and then next. So, things like the basic stuff about verifying your software downloads. Well, what the fuck is that all about? Okay, it's about hashes. It's about confirming that the build the developer put up there and or the project put up there is actually the one you've got and are about to deploy. Plenty of horror stories out there, including in Bitcoin, about downloading the wrong software or downloading software that's been meddled with at great cost. Early versions like that. So all of these things are building your self-strength, building your improving your privacy, improving your security. And the thing I love about k3tan's guide, just having been through it the other day, was it's just like, man, this is a gigantic shopping list. What do I want to start on? pfSense and the reverse proxy and improved privacy in my home network is probably where I'm going to go next. So thanks for that one, k3tan.
No worries, mate. You're welcome. But yeah, I think in terms of learning and where to start small. I really like that approach, and then slowly build yourself up. It's not going to happen in a day, but again, Rome wasn't built in a day. It really does sort of, you start small, and then so the way I would attribute my success to the fact that I have probably failed more times than some people have even tried. And so if you want to see success in some of these self-hosting areas, you just have to get out there and try. You will you will screw up. There is no doubt that you will bang your head against the wall a million times as to why this doesn't work. But you will you just keep at it. And I have spent thousands of hours on this because I just love doing it. It's just one of my passions. It's just, I sit there, I go through GitHub, I find what's good, and I fucking run that shit. What is this? How does it work? I just get in there and I do it.
Scott Galloway doesn't love you for it.
Well, he can go screw himself, mate. That's for sure. But those are the types of things that I really, really like to do. And so I continue to do that, and I will sort of just take actionable steps as to, okay, what am I doing here? What's the goal? How can I get better at it? And so that's how you'd start. There are plenty of resources on the internet. Like, it is crazy the amount of forums, the places that you can go to. Reddit is great as well. And, you know, any links in the sidebar there would be fantastic for places to start and build your own, what's known as a home lab as well. So there's guys out there who are building their own home labs, and that is why it is, you know, those are the types of things that you want to look for when getting this information. So that is how I learnt, and you know, you just do, and then you will get better at it over time. And then you'll start to think, oh, well, look, this thing here, I can, you know, mesh these two together and get a really nice outcome for what I want to do. And yeah, that's kind of just how you learn. You just kind of just go out there and you do it. And that's exactly what Wiz is saying as well. Just go out there and try it.
So, I mean, I relate super hard with that. I mean, that's basically my favorite way to learn, is just make a shit ton of mistakes. Just burn myself a million times until I realize the stove is hot and how I can boil water, you know? And that's how I learned with Bitcoin. And that's why sometimes I get a little bit worried when some people are like, oh, I've never lost a sat in my life. I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, man. Like, I'm a little concerned you're not pushing yourself hard enough. But yeah, I encourage the freaks to go out there and take sensible risks and learn that way. I think it is the most informative way to learn. I think tangentially along those lines, Wiz mentioned this, and I know both of you are very involved down in the local Bitcoin community down there. Maybe we should talk to the freaks about the importance of local meetups and talking to other individuals, like-minded individuals that are also going through the same situation. You want to start us off, Wiz, and tell us about your great Bitcoin community down in Aussie land? I think we lost him.
Potentially, yeah. Or he might be on mute. Who knows?
K3tan, why don't you show it to us?
Yeah, okay. So I think having a good community to sort of bounce ideas and talk about and just relate to somebody is a fantastic thing. You get to bounce ideas. You get to really understand at someone, you know, understand with someone and grow with them. So I would strongly recommend finding a bro. Now, for me, that bro for me has probably been Stefan. And so we've known each other for a very, very long time, and we've gone through this whole journey sort of together. And that has helped feed each other off to keep improving, to keep learning, to keep understanding. And I think that is really, really important to have. And so when you want to meet somebody with like-minded, you know, like-minded ideals and values, what you want to do is go to these and attend these. That is why it is kind of important to do those sorts of things.
Yeah, 100%, K3tan. The one of the biggest wake ups for me was getting to go to Honey Badger in 2018. I was working for customers up in Northern Europe, able to go over to Riga for the weekend. I was a Bitcoin nerd, but spending 2 days talking with Bitcoiners, probably my Bitcoin knowledge a year, and then as well. And the local scenes are even more important. So, because you find people who are kind of like k3tan was saying, at the same level of you as you, or have the same level of interest, and then you find you've got different things you're good, and you start sharing that knowledge together. And just this last weekend, there was two of us that got together. One of us put together a site where you can look inside a beehive, because he's an apiarist, and so he's put a lightning paywall over the front of that, because he wanted to learn how BTC Pay Server works and how websites work. So that was so we spent the whole afternoon looking at how he'd put that together, and then evolved into talking about 1,000 other Bitcoin topics. But that importance of talking with other Bitcoiners, I think, just super important.
Fuck yeah. I mean, that's where I met you. And in Riga. Riga was great. I think it like solidifies your conviction too. It gives you that encouragement to take the next step. Yes, someone in the comments mentioned that they're too paranoid for meetups, Randy McMillan. I respect that. I understand that. I felt that as well. And I was hesitant for a while because of it. But I'm glad I took that risk and took that trade-off. Just be cognizant of it, be practical about it. Yeah, that is obviously a decision you have to make for yourself. And as we talked about privacy with self-hosting, it's one that's filled with nuance and a shit ton of different trade-offs. So, think hard before you do it. Don't just do it willy-nilly, but, life's short and they're just enjoyable.
It's super enjoyable, and I think my experience going to different meetups in different places, the meetup organisers are always very welcoming and very non-intrusive. If you don't want to give your name, people are absolutely fine with that. If you want to just start talking about the coin, and whether it's number go up in terms of block height, coin joins, hash rate, difficulty, or the current Twitter drama, or whatever it is that tweaks your interest, you'll find people there who are immediately jump into those. I've been down to the Sydney Bitcoin meetups multiple times, but I could probably only name a handful of the people there that I've spoken to, and I've probably spoken to dozens and dozens. And that's totally fine, and that's been very representative of going to Bitcoin meetups everywhere. So I'd echo your point, Matt, that yeah, sure, if you're perhaps cautious about your identity and so on, going to meetups, life's short. I'm in my mid-50s. I've only got another half a decade, half a century to go. But yeah, too short to miss out on talking with Bitcoiners and learning about Bitcoin.
And the good ones say no pictures. I know BitDevs in New York City is a no picture zone. No shitcoins and no pictures. And, so you just have to be practical about it. Like, obviously you come with your own trade-offs. If you're meeting people in person, then they could obviously do physical harm to you in a compromising environment. They know the general area that you live in. Alternatively, we've seen with this pandemic, so much conversation move online, right? And, maybe you have a malicious individual or a spook or something in a small bar in Riga who's listening to your conversation. But now a shit ton of our conversations have moved to Zoom and shit, where you just have them constantly recorded 24/7. So there's trade-offs everywhere, and I don't necessarily think meetups are the worst, privacy-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I kind of want to pivot a little bit. And then I want to hit some audience questions. So to the freaks that are still with us in the audience, we appreciate you for carving out this time on your Happy Bitcoin Tuesday to join us. And so if you have questions, throw them in the chat and we will get to them hopefully. I love to get to I think that's the coolest part about this show, period. So where do I want to go with this? I want to talk about purpose-built devices. Do we think is there a place in the future where, you know, like is there a middle ground where we see, you know, like an Apple quality style device that is open source and self-sovereign, or is it always going to be a enthusiast nerd extra thing that has to be done?
So I think there's a lot of development that's already happening in the self-hosted space. I think if you have a look at, for example, there's a website called whyyouknowhost.org. That is a particular a piece of software that you can download, and it comes with plenty of self-hosted tools that are kind of like that one-click where you just put it onto your server and away it goes. And it will, you know, it will download all the software for you. It will do everything for you in the background. And I think that that is something that you could potentially use as a stepping stone to something more self-sovereign. If you want to go down that path, or you can just stick with why you know host because it gets the job done. I think there's just going to be an array of levels and a different array based upon people's ability, technical ability, as well as their time and convenience. There's always going to be this array of trade-offs. I don't think we're going to have one perfect solution that solves everything. Because the moment you start abstracting details away, that means less sovereignty, potentially. And so if if, for example, a development team comes out with this great thing and then, 10, 15 years down the track, they go, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore, then what do you do with all of that? How does that get maintained? So that is something that you probably want to consider when you are looking at how do you want to play this? Do you want to be completely self-sovereign from day one? Well, then you're going to need to start learning. You're going to need to start kind of really going down the rabbit hole. Or do you want to take these incremental steps, which might just be using a self-hosted box or a self-hosted VPS server or some sort of kind of, intermediary step that suits your budget, that suits your time, your learning abilities, those sorts of things. I think that is probably where it may land.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it happen, Matt. And I think node packages of that. So Bitcoin hasn't been, in the early days, wasn't the easiest thing to run. Whereas nowadays, the technical barriers to running a Bitcoin node are getting lower and lower and lower. There was some of the older packages around more established Raspberry Blitz. You've got the newer ones, MyNode, Umbrel. There's probably a few others, but they make running coin node super simple compared to going and buying the hardware, setting it up, the operating system, downloading the software, checking the self-signing, installing the software. And then the bit that is underappreciated is integrating the software. So having spent 3.5 decades working on integrating large complex systems, it's an underappreciated level of complexity, underappreciated task. I think, k3tan, you'd probably echo that some of those thousands of hours you've spent banging your head against walls, learning how to run software and configure software an awful lot of that's with how do I get piece of software A to talk to piece of software B, and whether that's how do I get LND to talk to Bitcoin Core, or how do I get L to talk to LND, etc., etc. And that's where things like node packages, as an example of more self-sovereign software, come into play. So, do you have the option of buying open source software, based around the Rock64 chips and so on, downloading from source, building from scratch? Absolutely. Can you buy the box pre-configured, pre-synced? Yep. And then you've got things like node packages which sit in the middle. And I think we'll start to see, and Nextcloud is probably another good example. So you've got, the ability to start hosting your own file storage, your own email, your own contacts, your own calendar, things that are all very exposing of your personal details and privacy. And you can get that hosted, you can buy a box, you can download the software, you can build the software. So the beauty is the increasing choices and filling out of that middle ground for to make it more accessible. And as it becomes more accessible, more people do it. As more people do it, more of those people start to think, yeah, maybe I'm not quite so comfortable with that, with having done it this way. I'm now going to take the next step and build it all from scratch myself. And so it's an incremental thing.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with both of you. I think an interesting thing that people should grapple with in terms of ease of use when it comes to sovereignty is auto updates. Because if you talk from a security and privacy perspective, from anyone besides the maintainer of the software, you want to stay up to date. And we see this with routers a lot. And the router is in a modern home is the command center. The router is like, it all begins and ends with your router. And if your router is compromised, you're fucked. If your router is compromised, you're fucked. And people don't really put that much thought into that device. And where they usually get fucked is they don't update soon enough. They're running old software that isn't updated and patched for the newest issue. But when you're talking about trust minimized systems, auto updates are the fucking worst because an auto update could be malicious. So I don't know if we ever can balance that. There'll always be people who will be better off auto updating, and they will have to wholeheartedly trust the supplier of whatever they're using. And then there'll be people that aren't auto updating and are going to have to actually practice, personal responsibility and make judgment calls on what software they update and when they update it and be on top of that shit. But the most important thing is that there's competition and that you have multiple choices and that not everyone's running the same thing. And I mean, while we started recording this show, I only saw it in passing, but Jeff Bezos stepped down as CEO, right? And of Amazon and AWS, they run our internet. Like so many services and sites depend on AWS. So if we end up in a situation where people are using, 10 different self-hosted solutions, and some have different trust levels than others, like that's still an infinite improvement over just everyone hosting it on Amazon, Google, and Microsoft.
Yeah, I think that's why Jeff stepped down. Jeff's read Katan's guide and he's gone, fuck, wrong.
Good one, Wiz. I doubt it, but yeah, I think, look, with this, having the options available to you, I think is fantastic. The guys who want to hold their own keys, who want to run their own node, who want to do these things, it is always going to be available for them with multiple options to do that. We're not all running Electrum. We're not all running, a particular piece of software. And I think that that is the best part. So yeah, that is something that, you know,
We're
should
all
be
running Bitcoin Core.
well, yes, and I think that you will see over time that those implementations may start to, and I think there's already been talks of that, of just building out another implementation that obviously talks to each other and is compatible with one another. But there are other instances out there that you can run. And, you know, like, for example, the Wasabi guys have packaged in
But that's
Bitcoin
ridiculous.
knots. Yeah, I mean, but do you know what I mean? Like, I understand that we are all running Bitcoin Core. However, having said that, though, Bitcoin Core is one of the most trusted pieces of software and has the most eyes on that code. So that's something.
I think the key is, I mean, the key with Bitcoin Core is that there's no auto updates. So we're not all running the same version of Bitcoin Core. I haven't updated Bitcoin Core yet.
Yep, that's true.
So I think you almost get a lot of the benefits that people talk about with multiple implementations you get with just, you know, not auto updating your software and having backwards compatibility. Someone in the comments, Surfer Jim, our boy in the comments, asked if you have any experience with Start9's private server k3tan.
So I looked into Start9. So what they have a business model that basically I haven't been able to run it myself. So you need to get the image to flash onto your Raspberry Pi. You have to pay for that. And so that's their business model. And if you want, you can compile it from source, but it is a little bit more technical and in depth. So at that point, I tried to do it. I wasn't really able to successfully do that. So then I kind of stopped there. But I may go out and buy the actual image and see what they've got. But that's as far as I've gotten so far.
But same with me. I have not used it yet. Wizard of Oz, have you used Start9?
But I was in Al's lacrosse group when Matt Hill was presenting, and it's certainly a project I'm super interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I like the concept. I like the concept of all these home nodes, these home servers. You know, like the Raspberry Blitzes, the Noddles. Start9 definitely seems promising to me. I do have some misgivings that it all relies on the SD card. Yeah, Embassy OS is what Randy McMillan said, but I know they're working to make it so that it works on an SSD, just like some of their competing packages work on. Yeah, so I mean, I think it should just be I want to see a lot of different options in this play. I think Umbral also looks very interesting to me. They put like a really slick package together. And you can just go on.
I like it from an architecture perspective. So the thing I loved about my node and still is it's this gigantic knife of Bitcoin software. And when I cracked that thing open for the first time, it's like, oh man, apart from Bitcoin Core, what does all this other stuff do? Right, I want to run Lightning. Okay, away we went. And then there is, on the which I was more than for, there's just this huge range of software packages that are all integrate and work, and you can start learning about coin joins, you can learn about VPNs, you can learn about Tor, you can learn about RTL and ThunderHub and mempool, and huge range, fantastic. On the other hand, Umbral's taken a slightly different approach, which architecturally I'm a big fan of, which is the core here is the core of the platform is Bitcoin Core plus LND. Those two things every Bitcoiner should be running. You can obviously choose whether you're a fan of LND or you want one of the other 2 or 3 or 4 implementations of Lightning. But you should be running Lightning. You should be running Bitcoin Core. Taking an app store approach. So you can go to the app store Umbral and choose what it is that you want to deploy on your Umbral node. And because they've used containers to implement and deploy, that's very straightforward and very insulated and isolated. So it's a very neat solving that. How do you go from balancing we want to put lots of stuff on there because some do things that other people won't, so put it all on, the MyNode approach, versus Umbrel's approach of saying we want a solid foundation and then we want isolated pieces which each user can choose to deploy according to their needs. And it's a very sweet balance. Except doesn't have dark mode, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I think they're working on that though.
I've badgered them enough about it.
Yeah, so have I. When they first sort of started up, I said, mate, where's dark mode? That was the first question I had. I think they're still working on it, so hopefully soon.
One pain point I've noticed with these things is I kind of dove in during the bear market, just dove in head first. I do kind of agree that this is where things are heading, especially with Lightning. And then kind of tangential to our previous conversation, I was talking about Lightning. I was talking about Bitcoin fees, and I think people don't realize how cool the interaction is between Bitcoin and Lightning fee wise, because on-chain Bitcoin, you pay per the data that is stored on chain. So if your transaction is a small 1 million sats versus 20 million sats, if it comes from the same number of inputs and it's the same exact size on chain kilobytes wise, then you're going to pay the same fee, regardless that you're sending way more money. On Lightning, it's based on the amount you are sending. So it's a really cool concept there where inherently the way the fee structure works on chain is maybe a little bit more opaque to the average user, harder for them to grasp, but it benefits larger settlement transactions. And then on Lightning, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily perfect or ideal for small transactions. I mean, right now it is. There's a lot of nuance there, but at least it scales up based on the amount you send. And I think that's a very easy thing for someone to register. Oh, I pay, a 0.5% or 1/4% to send this transaction based on the amount I send. Yeah.
Bitcoin Core or layer 1 fees, Matt. And I don't think Bitcoiners talk about this enough to new coiners, is that in today's world, the current financial system, the legacy, which I love pointing out is part-time. I mean, what the fuck? Yeah, what is a trading day from 10 till 4 or something, or 9 till 3, or very part-time. But in the legacy financial system, the money you send, especially internationally, is a portion of the value. So it's very much a rent-seeking model. So they have the monopoly on sending money. If I want to send money to you in the US, Matt, or to Europe, then essentially the slice that gets taken as a fee by the bank is a proportion of the value. In layer 1 on Bitcoin, that's not the case. It's the complexity of the transaction, the size of the transaction. And as you say, if it's one UTXO and you're sending an amount and getting some change back, it's a pretty small, simple transaction. You don't for it. It really just comes down to how busy is everyone else on Bitcoin layer 1? How urgent is your transaction need? That determines the cost. Whereas Lightning, at first glance, appears to be like the current legacy system in the sense that, the higher the value, the more fee you will pay. The difference is, in Lightning, you have a Lightning node, and not exactly very high. They're the default, or maybe they're slightly lifted up. To create, I actually have to deposit Bitcoin and open channels, and I've got skin in the game. So small slice of each transaction, not so much thinking, it's actually reward for effort and for capital risk. And it's a it's quite a subtle but important distinction for Lightning. Firstly, from layer 1 to layer 2, from layer 1 to the legacy system, and from layer 2 to the legacy system. And yeah, we don't really talk about that enough with new coiners, I think.
K3tan, do we talk about fees enough to new coiners? You got them all convinced that they can use 1 sat per byte forever. So do you want to repent?
Well, we will see. I am hopeful. I don't think I'm confident, but I am hopeful that one day we will return to the normal stage of the world, maybe, where we will be able to see 1 sat per byte transactions go through. Whether that happens within this decade, I hope. But I think that there is a gang out there that wants to transact in 1 sat per byte, and I hope I stand with them, because well, I always want to pay the cheapest amount of fees. Having said that, though, I understand that the network does cost money to run, and so I may have to upgrade that to potentially 2 sats at some point.
Well, so the mempool hasn't cleared. The mempool hasn't cleared this year yet.
No, it hasn't. And so
that was one of my New Year's predictions, that the mempool wasn't going to clear all year.
Yep, but it's only been 1 month, Matt. It's only been 1 month.
I know, and I also made the prediction like every month leading up to it as well.
Okay, well, let's see, Matt. Let's see.
What most people don't realize is you could actually do decimals. So if your transaction was 1.2 sats per byte, then it confirmed.
That's right. Yeah.
But the 1 satters, so sometimes it dives into it, but it doesn't actually clear the full
Amount. Yeah. So some of my transactions did go through, and I was like, "Yep,
yeah, bullshit, big news.
It still works."
Sign the message, or I don't believe you. I mean, so some people think, right? Like, so fees are measured in sats, right? And we believe number goes up, right? I mean, I just came up with this on the spot, but I feel like every single person who I have on the show, I should now ask on the record, just to have it out there for posterity, because all the good freaks out there are archiving. By the way, you're not a true freak if you don't have an archive of every single episode of Tales from the Crypt stored locally in at least one location. And I'd go further than that. I actually have every single episode of Stefan's show also saved locally and noted. Because I think like that's like what you're supposed to do as a Bitcoiner. But anyway, so this is a new segment that I just came up with 2 seconds ago. Bitcoin is designed to pump forever. Disagree or agree?
It is designed to pump forever. Yes, I do think that it is designed that way. Yes. Whether it will, that's another question.
That's a no-brainer. Bitcoin is designed to pump forever, and it will. So are the fees. The days, I won't say 1 sat per byte are over, but the days of 1 sat per byte transactions clearing will become less and less frequent.
Well, it actually goes the opposite way. Is the reason I thought of this segment, besides the fact that every morning I wake up and I go, Bitcoin's designed to pump forever, was because one of the theories is we can have this argument all day. These are my favorite arguments to have with Bitcoiners at meetups. Is it bullish or bearish to say that 1 sat per byte will confirm? Because someone could argue that it's bearish because then we don't have a healthy fee market. Who are the miners? The miners aren't getting paid increased fees if 1 sat per byte are coming through. Maybe it's not consistent. So if we don't have a backlog and we have a situation where there's like weeks where there's just no fees, then miners drop off the network, and you just have a network that's not really secured, and block times are slow. Versus maybe it's bullish because 1 sat per byte is just so expensive in terms of purchasing power. right?
Well,
like maybe like we hold on to 1 sat per byte for longer than people think, just because the purchasing power gets so fucking strong of the sat.
that's exactly what that's the camp that I'm thinking about as well, is that, hey, what if 1 sat per byte, a normal, transaction might be 141 sats or something, and that 141 sats represents $141. Then, what is that not enough to incentivize a miner to put that through?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you guys were talking in cutbacks. So you're right, Matt. There are the two. The sats per byte is going to be a reflection of the quantity of transactions on the network, and I'm very bullish on that. Transaction numbers will go up, mempool will go up, sats per byte as a base minimum transaction level will go up. We'll get to the end of the decade, one sat per byte transactions will be a historical anomaly that the three of us will look back fondly on and talk about those with the days.
My dogs are eating food right now. Can you hear them through the mic?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, freaks. Live and learn. So yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with the fees. They're finished eating now, so we should be good. Low bandwidth guests should be required to upgrade internet before next appearances on any pod. Well, we are at least live streaming from a cabin in the woods to Australia, which is pretty impressive that we just take that for granted. But I do agree that it is frustrating when buffering happens, and also when we hear dogs in the background. What else do we have? I mean, I have you guys for a little bit longer. I want you to get on with your day. It seems like the audience doesn't have much more questions. Oh, I have one. Do we think, should we be concerned about the issues with Tor lately? Do either of you have a strong opinion on that? K3tan, do you have a strong one there?
No, I don't think I have a very strong opinion, just in that I think that they've released a patch, and it looks like it's up and running again, and people are able to now utilize that. We're also moving to version 3 on the Tor for your Bitcoin node, so that has been implemented, and I've had a look at that, and it looks like it just straight through upgrades very, very easily. So it looks like it's pretty good, and it seems to be okay at this point in time. It was out for maybe like a day or so, or a couple of days, and it's now all returned back to normal as far as what I can tell. It's not ideal, but it is probably the best way that we have to be able to expose or host things on the internet without exposing our IP address. And I think that is something that we should continue to protect and support over time. That's about it.
I mean, that's the failure. That's the main issue we have when you talk about self-sovereignty, right? Is okay, so you're going to run your server from your home. How do you protect your home's location, right? How do you protect that private information of where you're broadcasting from? And the only way to do that in any kind of real bandwidth intensive way is to trust a third party. And if you want to do it in a low bandwidth way, then you could use Tor, right? That's like a key issue that we're in the middle of right now. That is not solved. It's not a solved problem.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not solved yet.
Some person is asking how much privacy is actually gained by running a full node if it's over ClearNet. This question is an interesting one because it depends if you're broadcasting or receiving. If on the receiving side, if you're looking up balances, running it over ClearNet still gives you insane amounts of privacy gain, because if you're not using a Bitcoin node to interact with the network, you have to use a Bitcoin node. And if you're not using your own Bitcoin node, you're using someone else's node. that node you're trusting with two things. You're trusting it with your balances, your transactions, and your addresses, and how much Bitcoin you have, and you're trusting them to actually validate the rules, that you've agreed to, that it's actual Bitcoin agreed to by the consensus rules that you thought you agreed with. So the only way to accomplish both of those things in a trust minimized way is to run your own node. If you're running your own node, using your own node over ClearNet, and you're broadcasting transactions from it, you can end up exposing your IP address. So in terms of broadcasting, and there's mitigations that are being proposed, such as like Dandelion and stuff, in terms of broadcasting. But really, you're better off using Tor. And the crazy part is you're best using a third party broadcasting service like Blockstream.info's API through their Tor Onion site. Anyone disagree with that?
Nope, great analysis there.
Bam, bam.
Yep.
Yeah. What's up, Liz?
Format, and I guess with Janine and Ben earlier conversation, is that the level of communication from the Tor Foundation was left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, no, it absolutely left a lot to be desired. There's still no clear communication. They supposedly a patch has been issued. I guess not everyone's running it yet, but the issues are intermittent. It's fine. Like basically everyone should operate under the assumption that Tor will not be reliable in terms of uptime. I think it's relatively safe assumption that it's pretty private, like that there's no like glaring backdoors or anything in it to de-anonymize you if you stay within the Onion network, and you're not hosting a hidden service. If you're hosting a hidden service, we're still not 100% sure. There's so much fucking nuance here. But in the key issue that we're discussing here in terms of the recent attacks is reliability. And when we're talking about reliability, we're talking about the issue is your Tor only hidden services. In k3tan's self-hosting guide, if you're not using if you're not using Tor or a third party that you're trusting, the only way to connect back is to expose your IP address. So if you use Tor to connect back and Tor is down, then you're not going to be able to connect back. And that was the point I was trying to get to earlier. And Randy McMillan actually mentioned it in the comments in terms of traveling. And so in the bear market, I tried all these different self-node things, particularly because of Lightning, and CoinJoin because you want it running 24/7. Now I'm like traveling around and renting places, and it's way less practical. If this idea of self-hosting is way less practical if you're living a more nomadic life. You kind of have to have like your Citadel that you're running it in, because otherwise you just hit up the like internet limits. Like you just can't have something that's on 24/7, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it makes it a lot more challenging if you are some sort of like a digital nomad. It really, I mean, to do self-hosting properly and have a nice, stable internet connection generally requires the use of a home or business broadband connection. And so, yeah, it does. Yeah, if you're a digital nomad, then self-hosting, you might need to trust a hosting provider to do that for you.
And if you have to connect back through Tor, then Tor might be down.
Not ideal.
Matt,
yes, hit me.
so if you're a freak and you're starting to Bitcoin, and what are your top three for security property? Three.
What was that? I lost you at the end.
Sorry. What are the top three things you'd recommend for new folk who are looking to up their game? in security and privacy.
Well, I mean, I think that's what's difficult about all of this stuff, right? Is that you have to think, you have to actually use your own, like, you have to use your own judgment based on your own current situation. Like, we have freaks that are looking at an Amazon Alexa right now. If I'm on their TV, maybe I can, okay, Google, what's the weather? Like, I don't know if it just registered or might have just registered in their house. They have a wiretap that's just live in their house. Like, they should get rid of that, right? Then we have things like Elon Musk, like he tweets out, use Signal. You know, like, I think, like, if most people, like, if you use Signal for most things, like, it'll probably be a step up improvement, right? But it's, and then, I mean, on the Bitcoin side, like, secure your own keys, right? And even something as simple as using a phone wallet helps you. I think I think there's like two types of Bitcoiners. There's a type of Bitcoiner that's like, you should only go to cold storage when you're ready. And then there's type of Bitcoiner that's like, I'd rather you have it in a hot wallet on your phone than on an exchange. And I'm the second type. But I think you just, I think the most important thing is motivation. I think we could all agree that the most important thing is realizing that there's a need and that you have to fix it. You have to improve your situation, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think too, when we, just to go more specifically on Bitcoin, and I would fall into the same camp. I mean, k3tan's heard me say this before. Having Bitcoin is better than not having Bitcoin. Having Bitcoin off the exchange, better than having it on the exchange. Having it in a cold wallet, better than having it in a hot wallet. And so on and so on. So it's a series of progressions, and there's plenty of hardcore Bitcoiners that will say no, it should be in a multi-sig secured with cold card, only using PSBT and multiple devices, blah 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 blah. It's way too far for new coiners. They just want, tell me the next thing I need to do. And I guess the first few things I always tend to advise are small practical steps. So I'm firmly convinced that the biggest risk to Bitcoiners' security, particularly with regards to Bitcoin, is PEBCAC. The problem sits between the keyboard and the chair. It's you, and it's doing stupid things or doing things that you're just not aware of that are a risk, not paying attention. So the few things I always good manager, use a VPN, and run a full node, because those are really basic things. Hold your own keys. If you start with those three, then you're a long way forward than 95% of the rest of the population, period, who are using Facebook sign-on and Google sign-on, etc., etc. So it's a step and a journey. What about you, k3tan?
I think for me, it's probably, hold your own keys and use your own node as well. I think to just get yourself off the exchange is probably one thing that you should be looking to do. And whether that's, on a hot wallet for a small amount and then in more other cold storage type solutions. But then also moving on to using your own full node as well. So those are the things that I would also, echo. But then also using things like VPN and Tor, where if it's required, there's a thing like you have to, I guess what Matt said, you have to assess what you think is a risk and then move from there. If you've got an Alexa at home, that's probably the first step. Get rid of that, and then move on to actually, maybe you might want to look into your Wi-Fi, right? If you've got you've got the default usernames and passwords in there, you might want to change those. If your Wi-Fi password is just, password 1 or something like that with a capital P, you may want to change that. So those are the types of things that you might want to look into to just incrementally do better. So yeah.
100%. I mean, I just want to show real quickly. K3tan's got a educational program that he's been doing with Stefan Livera called Ministry of Nodes. I put that in the comments on all the platforms. If you just type in Ministry of Nodes on YouTube, he's got a bunch of guides there. I mean, this is one of the issues, I think. And I go back and forth on it. So I put in the comments bitcoin-intro.com, which is run by 6102 Bitcoin, maintained by 6102 Bitcoin. I think he's on kind of the right target in terms of a checklist. Like, it's like you start by buying Bitcoin and like getting and before you get to actual sovereign proper Bitcoin usage, so-called proper Bitcoin usage. I think in practice, though, it's hard to find a single thing because it depends on the person. And so I try and focus on two things recently. I focus on, first of all, trying to create the motivation, right? So privacy is important. Sovereignty is important. You can lose your coins if you keep them on an exchange, right? Like motivation, get them to realize why. You get them to realize why, then people will eventually try and figure it out themselves, right? Yes, we have node.guide from Bitcoin Q&A. Bitcoin Q&A's got a bunch of great guides. He was also on Citadel Dispatch if you want to check out the earlier episodes. I think his full guides are at bitcoiner.guide. Bitcoiner.guide should be it. Or it's bitcoiners.guide. But anyway, but then at the same time, like I feel like almost giving people options hurts. And this is one of the things that I really liked about your self-host guide. This is one of the things that I've been doing at werunbitcoin.com. My Bitcoin guide is like, you just pick best practice. I think there's a place for both. There's a place for motivating people and having them seek out that knowledge. There's a place for these like checklists where like you can just send a universal checklist to most types of individuals and they can go down that checklist. And then there's a real place, I think, for just saying, this is the best practice. Like, this is how you should be set up. This is your, all the trade-offs considered. Here are the trade-offs. This is probably the best way to run your phone. This is probably the best way to secure your Bitcoins. This is probably the best, VPN provider. Like, we can have like a whole conversation about trade-offs between VPN providers. I just don't have the time for that. I would rather just tell them to use Mulvad. And if Mulvad, if Mulvad fails us, it fails us all together, right? And I think more people end up using it that way. It saves you more time. So there's this whole balancing act that you have to fucking always deal with, right?
Yeah, it's so true, Matt.
Yes, it's a fine line. Yeah.
But one of the great things about Bitcoin is it's got number go up energy, and so for people who maybe took a little bit of a punt on Bitcoin for the first time last year when it took a dip to 3,000 or 3.5, we're buying in the bear market in 2018, 2019. Maybe they bought $1,000. Well, that $1,000, and maybe they took the next step over the last year or two and downloaded a software wallet and transferred their coins off the exchange. Good on them. That $1,000 is now $10,000, and it's sitting there in their phone. They're probably not too comfortable about $10,000 sitting in their phone. Well, in the next year or two, $1,000 number might be a whole lot more than that. So there is that. That moves people to go, yeah, that's probably not the best spot to have. What happens if the phone breaks? What happens if someone steals the phone, and so on? And I think NGU technology, Bitcoin's designed to pump forever, does help that learning process. It incentivizes it correctly.
Yeah, Matt, you talked about motivation, and I think when the number goes up, you start to pay attention a lot more than if it was just the amount that you put in initially. And so that's when you start to see people go, "Oh, I better pay attention now." So, I concur with that. It really is the motivation. That is one big driver to do better. It certainly has been for me. So,
yeah, I mean, I think usually when I talk about motivate things that create the motivation, usually it's a negative thing. I think Bitcoin is kind of unique in that it has a positive motivator involved as well, which is the amount goes up that you're holding. So it's nice that it's not just all negative motivation. Usually, I would say in this space, it tends to be negative. You know, you get burned, you get deplatformed. You know, your money's frozen on PayPal or something, and you learn. You get doxxed and you learn. So the number go up element is definitely a nice positive thing. Someone mentioned in the comments Moon Wallet. It kind of hit my radar. I don't think either of you guys have used it yet. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to use that.
Yeah, so I mean, Moon Wallet's one of these, like, it's aiming to straddle the ground between simple, you know, and self-sovereign at the same time. So I do look forward to trying that out. I hope to see more of that. We are short on time here. I appreciate you guys joining us. I appreciate all the freaks who joined us. I appreciate both you, Wiz, and K3tan for joining us all the way from Australia in your morning. I know mornings are more difficult, so it's extra cool that you guys joined us for this live show, because we do have this hard time set in place for this massive eternity of every episode so far. So we didn't want to ruin that. So I appreciate you guys coming on. I hope to see you guys again sometime soon in person. Well, I haven't met K3tan yet in person, but I look forward to seeing you again in person, Wiz. Maybe at Bitcoin 2021 in June in Miami. That would be fucking dope. And I look forward to having you both on the podcast again soon. You know, this is one of those things, Citadel Dispatch. I want to be a thing where we just have almost like a constant rotation with the same crew, just talking about the same topics and evolving on it and all learning together. So huge thanks to both of you guys. You can follow them on Twitter. K3tan said @K3tan, TAN, and Wiz is at BTCSchellingPt. That's BTCSchellingPt. I'm Matt Odell, your host. We will be back next week at the same time, 2200 UTC on Bitcoin Tuesday. I will see you on RHR, probably like early afternoon. We don't have a set time there. Hopefully that will be a live stream as well. Orange coin good, number go up.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, K3tan.
Cheers, Matt.
Love you, freaks. Stay humble and stack.